Hello and welcome to the Future of Strategy fireside chat with Ed Mayo. Ed is a great friend of mine and is the chief executive of Pilot Light. Pilot Light is a UK charity, which is a UK organisation which is trying to help charities with their business planning and with their objectives and achieving their objectives for sustainability. Ed's background is second to none in the area of sustainability. He has been the Secretary General of the Business Cooperatives Network, and he's a leader and innovator in the whole area of social enterprise, the third sector, and of course sustainability. Ed himself was part of the team that developed the Fair Trade Mark, has been Chief Executive of the New Economics Foundation as well. Ed, it's a huge privilege to have you with us today. I can't think of anyone better to be introducing our sessions on sustainability. And I guess my first question is, in a COVID pandemic, why do we need to focus on sustainability? Are there other things that are more important right now?
Well, thank you, Rebecca. And I guess it's easy to see sustainability as something else, something different. I guess if you're in the ocean, it doesn't look blue, it looks blue to the observer. And it seems to me sustainability is best thought as the blue of the ocean. It would be wrong to see COVID as not part of the sustainability agenda just because we're working on recycling or clean energy or something different. COVID is very much part of the sustainability agenda, and in ways, if there's one thing that we can see as predictable as having emerged from COVID and the response, these are the kinds of shocks that the system will face. We don't always know where they will come from. And of course, there is an ecological backstory to COVID, the loss of habitats, pushing of wildlife closer to people, the global connectivity, not just of trade, but of people as well, creates new systems, vulnerabilities that are there. So sustainability should not be thought as, it's just the environment. It is, in that classic sense from Gro Harlem Brundtland from the 1980s, social, economic, and environmental health within it. I think we will look back and see that what we learn from the COVID pandemic of 2020 and 2021, no doubt, will be instrumental in shaping policy around sustainability over the decades to come.
I think you've mentioned something very important there, and of course, with COVID, there's a huge emphasis on just getting treatments out, and that's going to have an enormous environmental impact, apart from anything else, because a lot of this is single-use plastic. But what you said is, the most important thing is actually that sustainability isn't just environment, is it? It's about the way we work. It's about the way we trade. And obviously, this is a trade conference. So tell us a little bit about the Fair Trade Mark and where your background in sustainability comes from, and what sustainability really means to you.
Yes, of course. I think the early days of the Fair Trade Mark were kind of wonderfully naive and amateur. It's emerged into, the Rolls-Royce, Tesla, if you prefer, of kind of ethical labels. And, we've seen a move towards doing what the Fair Trade Mark was early to do, which is to find effective empirical grounds on which you could mark out trade as being something different based on how it was produced rather than what the product necessarily is. Although in the early days of the fair trade movement, we almost fell over because of the quality of the product. some of the early fair trade coffees really were pretty dire. So we needed to focus on quality and then start to put down on paper the criteria for what we meant by fair trade, because that's not an easy thing to do. But once we got the first criteria, and those again were relatively kind of naive, it felt like we'd created a map of the landscape that had become part of the landscape, if you know what I mean, because we could then differentiate and distinguish between fair trade and other products. Early days of fair trade, again, we were seen as a bit crazy. Our inspiration, funnily enough, was from Australian sheep farmers. I'm not sure I've told this story before, but the wool mark, when I was young, was a kind of leading consumer label that had been created by Australian sheep farmers to preserve quality through a quality assurance mark. And that's classically what accreditation systems and assurance systems try to do. Economists know that there's kind of Akerlof's story of the lemons, a competition economist who said that, if you don't have ways of judging quality, then you'll always get a race to the bottom. So in the context of fairness or overseas development, we were trying to build something that was a quality kind of system. And we went to the supermarkets and we got laughed at. One supermarket, I remember, telling us that, what was it? It was such a crazy idea. Only vicars and priests would buy it. And of course, in the time since then, fair trade has proved inspiring, both in terms of its sales and the impact it has, positive impact on the lives and communities of commodity producers across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. But also, I think, as an example of how you do this very difficult element, because trade is fundamentally based on simplicity, that you're trying to get things as ordered and as regular and as consistent as possible, because when you do that, people can have confidence in what they're getting from wherever it comes. Sustainability almost called for the opposite. It called for complexity. So how do you bring complexity into a simple system? Fair trade mark was just one example.
So, I mean, the fair trade mark has to be inspirational to the audience, because actually I'd slightly argue with the term simplicity in trade, because the messages need to be very simple, but trade is one of the most complicated areas in the world, and a lot of people listening to this are in trade finance, which is incredibly complicated, and understanding counterparty risk and understanding the way in which goods move between places is all about anti-money laundering. It's all about know your client, and increasingly the whole sector is trying to introduce an ESG, a sustainability layer to the way in which those trade finance transactions happen. Now, there are a lot of crazy ideas out there. And a lot of us have been laughed at in, as trying to think about different ways of doing this. But what can the sector learn, do you think, from your experience in free trade? Because I feel there is something there. You talked about several things. One was quality. One was reducing something down to something simple. Another is clearly collaboration and getting everybody to do the same thing. And then it's scaling it out in a way that the people who believe in it and getting everyone else to believe in it as well. So what do we need to do?
Well, the formula you set out is a good formula, and it's a difficult formula because it's both top down and kind of bottom up as well. Before the fair trade mark came on board, and I was working with a kind of team of people here in the UK, kind of around that. There was a model set up by a cooperative in Mexico, together with Solidarity human rights groups in the Netherlands. And their approach to fair trade was simply to say, we're acting in solidarity. We don't ask for proof. we just believe you. You're a co-op, so you must be good. And with the fair trade mark, we saw that actually that kind of solidarity works well in small groups, but it can't scale. So you have to have the systems in place to be able to build trust.
So this is really about measurement, isn't it? It's about why you're measuring something, and you know, using it as a stick and a carrot, if you like.
Yes, it is, and can be enabling. It can also be distracting as well, and there can come to be something of a measurement industry. Coming back on what you were saying earlier, Rebecca, about you know, really the advances in trade finance and some of these questions, the trade-offs between simplicity and complexity. There is a Tesla's law in computer science. The man that created cut and paste said that any application has an irreducible and growing amount of complexity. It's simply who has to handle that complexity. So it's as if we can't avoid the unfolding complex and unpredictable challenges of sustainability, whether it's COVID on the one hand, you know, whether it's obviously climate change, species loss, inequality, mental health, all of these complex challenges, hard to deal with, hard to predict. So there's complexity out there. How do you fold that into a system of measurement or a system of finance that then builds on kind of that measurement? If it's done well, then I think it keeps things simple for those who need that simplicity, but you can't avoid it, you can't escape it. So in the fair trade case, we, I mean, I don't think our first draft criteria were complex, to be honest, and it's become more so over time. I think being able to critique your own work is an absolute necessity in this field. It's a constant learning, but it did create criteria that were there and available. Of course, you know, in the supermarkets when they opened up, and they did and have done kind of around the world, consumers are not making choices based on those criteria. They're emotional decisions, non-cognitive decisions, split-second decisions, you know, rooted in branding and rooted in identity. So the complexity of trying to create a trademark for global justice, for human development, had that combination of somebody doing the complex work and then finding the way to deliver it in simplicity.
So your recommendation to any process behind all of this, and there's a huge amount of work going on in the sector to introduce these types of metrics, and you know, I hope at some point Coriolis is going to be involved with all of those as well. You know, the process has to be to understand the complexity. So what should we be looking at when, I mean, you can't just shut things off. This can't just be a compliance solution, can it? It has to be a behaviour change solution as well. So how can banks actually work with their clients and with their communities to nudge people towards a better and more sustainable way of trading?
I think it's in the core of what you said there around it's not just about compliance, or if it was just about compliance, then how is compliance to be achieved? And the answer is not through expensive and intrusive policing, or through, you know, kind of arcanery and chicanery in terms of, you know, playing the numbers on measurement. Compliance has to come through capability, which is that those who are involved in the system understand what sits behind what is being measured. There's an old English saying that you don't make a sheep fatter by weighing it, whether that's for the local market or for export. So measurement has a place, but it's only a place in some ways as a tool for capability. You know, I go back to the you know, what we've seen through the pandemic and the other shocks that we might see. We know that the level of environment, you know, risks, weather risks, insurable risks, has increased kind of over time. So we are moving towards a system which, for all of the benefits that it brings in terms of access to goods and economic gains, also comes with significant risks and shocks as well. So how do we know where they are coming from? And it seems again to me that sustainable development, you can measure it, you can put it down to the different strands, E and S and a G, and within E or an S or a G, you can have then 12, 24, 100 different categories that are within that. Ultimately, we can't manage our way through necessarily to a sustainable future. We need to sense and respond in the context of being within a feedback loop, if you like, within a complex system. So the challenge of sustainability is that it is multi-level. It's hard to kind of just take responsibility. I mean, what am I responsible for as an individual consumer? What are companies responsible for? What are their supply chains responsible for? And if you draw it in a reductionist way, in a very bounded way, then no one really takes responsibility for, what political scientists would call collective action problems, problems where you need joined up solutions and you need collaborative action right across the trading chain. So because we're challenged in that way, responsibility doesn't sit easily with drawing boundaries. That's how the system needs to respond. So building capabilities for collaboration in response to the challenges of sustainable development. And yes, absolutely, we will measure. But remember the warning of life cycle assessment, life cycle analysis, which was thought to be the kind of golden grail. We're going to be able to, for every product, know exactly what the environmental impacts of that kind of product was. And even with some of the most obvious products that could be out there, there are contested reports, different research. And this isn't just, distortions of who's funding the research. This is genuine and irreducible complexity. So measurement is a tool, but it can't become an end in itself. It's a tool for trust and it's a tool for capability.
That's all absolutely fascinating. And I mean, we both have an economics training. So the key thing here is that obviously as soon as you start to measure something, one of the laws of economics is it ceases to be a useful thing to measure. So there is a huge element within all of that, which is this behavior change, this collaborative nature of it all, and the way in which we all need to recognize this is a problem, this is a responsibility. And, we need to get beyond the sort of corporate social responsibility and just start doing something about it. This isn't about reporting, this is about doing. I guess I'd ask one final question, and all of this comes down to, what does the future look like? How do we move from where we are now? How do we take the lessons of COVID, take the challenges that we face right now of getting vaccines out to hundreds of thousands of millions of people all the way around the world using technology and transport and logistics that's unsustainable? How do we get from there to a future where we are doing the right thing and it is sustainable and trade in itself has become sustainable?
Well, I think there's huge challenges there for the international traded sector. Just the figures around fossil fuel use and greenhouse gas emissions mean that cleaning up and greening the mechanics, the plumbing of international trade is a core imperative. But I think beyond then, actually, I think it's possible to imagine how trade can form part of a resilient and kind of rich kind of economy that's got connections at all levels. To do so, I think if we go back to trade theory, one of the assumptions there is no externalities. And in economics terms, of course, we have the exact opposite. And this is the challenge of what economics does, is it draws a line in the sand and says whatever's within that circle counts and is of value, and whatever falls outside of it is not. And you put a price on what is in the circle. And what's outside of the circle, of course, are so many things that are vital for the challenge of sustainability. So we need to, it's not just the economics of internalizing those externalities, how that's done through policy or the like, but we need a trading system that fully reflects the world kind of around and is able to live up to that. That seems to me to be, a project that's underway in all parts of the economic life. There's some extraordinary work, I think, happening in terms of greening finance. The trade finance is one part of a much larger agenda around green finance and reconciling kind of finance and using finance in line with the Sustainable Development Goals. And you'll see similar kind of moves in other parts of the economy, kind of moves around credit, around ownership, kind of, all parts, if you like, of economic life. So we have to sort this out, that there is kind of no alternative. And trade needs to be a form of and a source of both resilience and also of lower impact in terms of the damage that we're seeing at the moment, particularly in climate terms.
Ed, you've summarised it extremely well yourself. I can't trump that, I'm afraid. But I mean, just to summarise, this is all about taking responsibility. It's about understanding that we need to act quickly and we need to act together. Ed, it's been an absolute privilege speaking to you. Thank you so much for your time today. And I know that the audience will really appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.